Imagine you're a young boy, 6 years old, living in squalor in a hotel room with your 5 other siblings and 2 parents. You're so hungry and thirsty, you'd do anything to fill your stomach or quench your thirst. You can't get your hands on clean water, so you look around and find your only option is to drink out of the toilet. My name is Cameron. This is the story of Sergio Rhodes. The family resided in this motel room, the Knights Inn in Kissimmee, Florida. There were a total of 5 siblings living in this space. The family had moved there in March 2022, and none of the children were enrolled in school or had regular contact with the outside world. Late at night, on July 5th, 2022, dispatch received a call from the Knights Inn. The woman on the phone said her son was sick and unconscious. She told dispatch that he was breathing, but he could not open his eyes. For reasons unknown, about halfway through the call, the story changed from him being sick to him having gone underwater. She explained that he must have done so in the toilet bowl in the hotel room. Dispatch knew something was off. Police rushed to the scene. When they arrived at the Knights Inn, they hurried to locate the room. They heard commotion and screaming inside when they first got there. After they knocked on the door, a woman, Bianca, answered the door and told them she was the mother of all the children inside. They saw behind her a distraught man, Larry Rhodes, the father. He was holding 6-year-old Sergio in his arms like a lifeless baby. Officers tried to push past Bianca to get inside, but there was an obstruction behind the door. They had to physically force their way in, and one officer immediately grabbed young Sergio from Larry's arms. The father seemed extremely confused and not quite grasping the gravity of the situation. Police knew they needed to start CPR right away, but there were obstacles all over the room. The floor was such a mess that the officer couldn't even put the boy down to perform life-saving procedures. Instead, the officer placed him on the bed, where there was an opening to perform CPR. The other officer began setting up a breathing bag to assist. They scanned the room while doing CPR and noticed it was a pigsty. There were clothes strung everywhere, toys, old food, and trash flung about. A foul odor permeated the small room. There were only 2 queen beds to sleep 8 people. 2 large adults and 6 children. As they took the scene in, the father Larry told them that the boy had swallowed a lot of water. He reported he found the boy unconscious with his head in the toilet bowl. When he attempted to pick him up to see what was wrong, water came out of his mouth. One of the officers reported that he was trying to revive the boy. They also noticed that his body was damp, helping to certify the water claim. Now in the room, watching the horrific scene, were 5 other children between the ages of 1 and 5. When the other officers saw the state of the rest of the children, they noticed the alarming bruising and lacerations on the rest of them, as well as signs of malnourishment. One of them, a 4-year-old boy, was also injured so badly they felt he needed to go with Sergio to the hospital. The younger brother pointed at his father and told officers, "Daddy struck me." Both the boys had numerous marks and swelling on their faces. When police backup and medical services finally arrived at the scene, little Sergio and his brother were loaded in an ambulance. Both boys were quickly transported to the hospital. When asked about the other children and their extensive injuries, Bianca and Larry claimed the kids had got into an altercation the night before. Apparently the children liked to pretend they were WWE or MMA fighters and wrestled each other. But unless they were doing steel cage matches, there is no way this play fighting caused this much harm. Doctors later confirmed that this story by the parents was complete bogus. Larry tried to leave the property and go to the hospital with the boys. He was in extreme disarray, not quite knowing what to do with himself. Of course, police couldn't let him leave until they got more information. They tried to explain to him the situation was incredibly serious. his son would most likely not make it. At first, Larry was not complying with officers and was adamant about going with the ambulance, but officers were able to calm him down. See, Larry had schizophrenia, and it was later revealed by Bianca that he had not had access to his medication. This caused him to become extremely violent and to experience delusions and hallucinations that made him disoriented and angry. The evidence of this was over his children. Even the infant, the 9-month-old, appeared to be moderately assaulted. Investigators then separated the family, getting all the children into a vacant hotel room, then getting Bianca alone and detaining Larry in a police car. Once separated from their parents, the children were in brighter spirits. When police began their investigation and started asking questions, the kids were able to open up without interference. In the vacant hotel room, officers noticed the young kids making jokes and playing around while being covered in bruises and marks. They were strong for their age and able to somehow remain positive in such a tragic situation. This wasn't their first go-around. It would hopefully be the last time they had to experience such cruelty. They were more than happy to be away from their barbaric parents. The fear seemed to slip from their faces as the officers reassured them. Back at the hospital, the Department of Children and Families took over the boys and placed all the children under an emergency plan. The older brother, Sergio, was showing no brain activity and a critical brain bleed. They did not expect him to live. Doctors transported him to Arnold Palmer Hospital, hoping they would be able to save his life. Young Sergio had substantial injuries. Both his eyes were black and blue, nearly swollen shut. He had a cut under his lips as well as cuts on his arms and legs. There was discoloration on his wrist, probably from being restrained or grabbed. His left collarbone was fractured, either from blunt force trauma or being yanked aggressively by his arm. His younger brother stayed behind and was watched by officers and the DCF agents as they rushed Sergio to the next hospital. He also had cuts on his face and swelling. He had marks on his stomach and chest. Not Sergio, the other boy. Now back at the crime scene, officers took a closer look at the hotel room bathroom. They noticed that the toilet seat where Sergio was injured had no water on it. The floor was dry. Investigators knew if the boy had drowned or was being drowned, there would be water everywhere. The shower was still running, so they turned it off. Looking around, taking all the physical evidence in and seeing the state of the children, plus the 4-year-old's remarks about his father, confirmed to the authorities that these kids were being assaulted by their parents. Both Larry and Bianca were arrested and taken to jail. When Larry was questioned, he refused to say anything. Larry wouldn't look at the officers, keeping his head down and repeating over and over he needed an attorney. Bianca, however, had plenty to say. She was essentially the breadwinner for the home, working every day for nearly 12 hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. She was also enrolled in school for a degree as a medical assistant and worked for rideshare companies Uber and Shipt. She would be gone all day while Larry was supposed to take care of the children. They were permanently living in this hotel room. She claimed she never noticed anything wrong with the children because they were fed, bathed, and dressed by the time she got home every night. All she knew of what transpired during the day was whatever Larry would tell her. Supposedly, she never kissed the kids goodnight or tucked them in, or gave them any sort of closer look to notice the injuries. Bianca claimed the kids were healthy and all caught up on their vaccinations. They were all well behaved. They did not, however, attend school or have any friends. She also said there was plenty of food and drinks for the children in the hotel room, but there was no kitchen for them to make any meals. She firmly asserted she was never aware that they were being beaten by the father. That day, however, she had left to do a drug test at Quest Diagnostics. She was gone for several hours. When she returned, one of the children, the 4-year-old, was standing in the corner for wetting the bed the night before. Bianca then went to use the bathroom. When she opened the door, she found Sergio drinking out of the toilet. Instead of seeing the situation for what it was, that her son was so thirsty he was willing to drink out of a toilet bowl, she got upset with him for misbehaving and sent him to go stand in the corner. According to Bianca, this was the traditional way of disciplining the children. She would put them in the corner for upwards of 30 to 45 minutes at a time, an eternity for a child. When Larry would put them in the corner, he would take it a step further, making them do humiliating things for his own sick satisfaction. He would force them to do exercises like squats and jumping jacks, and sometimes when multiple of them would get into trouble, he would force them all to share a large t-shirt and stand in the corner. Yes, one t-shirt, multiple children. Imagine the suffocation and restlessness. And in all the true crime videos I've done, I've never heard a parent getting a large t-shirt and stuffing his children in there, being trapped in their father's shirt. Wow. Standing in the corner, sometimes for nearly an hour. When Bianca sent Sergio out of the bathroom and into the corner, she went in to use it and closed the door behind her. Next, she heard what sounded like 3 very loud claps and heard Larry yelling at the boy's name in a rage. When she came running out of the bathroom, Sergio was laid out on the floor, unconscious. Larry, realizing he had gravely injured the boy, panicked and grabbed him up. He commanded Bianca to call 911 as he threw the kid in the shower, hoping to wake the young boy up. The father was genuinely upset, trying to revive Sergio. He performed CPR as the emergency services were on the way. Evidently, Larry had a long history of trauma. He had memory issues and a very troubled childhood. When asked about his medical situation, all he could tell investigators was that he was taking Seroquel. He didn't know why he was taking it or who prescribed it to him, just that the doctors told him he needed it. He wasn't sure how to properly take care of his dire mental health issues, and his children were tortured for it. Bianca accepted this about him though. She knew he had issues with violence and aggression. They were together for over 7 years and managed to have 6 children together. The young mother told police she knew she needed to leave Larry because of his anger issues, but did not have the money to do so. You would think over the course of those 7 years that she would stop having children with a lunatic and find a way out. But in recent weeks, he had supposedly become increasingly irritated and dangerous. She did not want to upset him by trying to leave. She claims only a week before Sergio was taken to the hospital, she had told her son she would find a way for them to get out of the situation. Sergio was the oldest kid, with the most pressure on his head to set an example. No matter what he did, it was never good enough for his parents. His innocent life was lost 7 days later. See, Sergio was on life support, hanging on by a thread for days, but doctors knew there was no hope left. They pulled the plug on 6-year-old Sergio. Bianca later agreed if she left Larry earlier, her son would be alive. The doctors performed an autopsy and uncovered all the horrendous injuries Sergio had sustained. They declared he was beaten to death, causing blunt force trauma to his head and abdomen. He sustained a brain bleed and a lacerated liver, all for drinking out of a toilet. As the police continued their investigation of the other children and the hotel room, the horrors continued to unfold. When asked about the family, other guests at the hotel reported they sometimes heard commotion coming from the room. They heard a lot that day. Inside the room, investigators found blood spatter on the wall where Sergio had been sent to the corner. It must have been where Larry began to punch him. Enraged by the fact he was secretly drinking from the toilet, detectives found Sergio's blood spatter on Larry's shorts he was wearing that day when they removed his clothes as evidence. They also found a handgun and multiple magazine clips. It was an exceedingly hostile environment for the children to grow up in. Remember, Larry was a father who experienced hallucinations and violent impulses and had access to a loaded handgun, and a mother who pretended like she saw nothing wrong. Police found a sandal in the corner with dried blood on the bottom, and Bianca confirmed this was the regular shoe that Larry would hit the boy with, and it stayed in the corner ready to be used at any time. Detectives found it deplorable that this very shoe had been used so often, with such force that the blood of the children stained it. All the kids had bruises and discoloration on their bottoms where Larry would hit them. They had marks on their bodies that matched the imprint of the shoe. The late Sergio had deep soft tissue hemorrhage and lacerations on his bottom. He also had belt marks covering his skin. The other children had deep scarring, internal and external, where they had been beat, most likely for years or for their entire lives. The youngest of them, the infant, had a black eye, rug burn on his nose, severe diaper rash, bruises and hemorrhaging of his left eyeball. One of the daughters had a blackened left eye, bruising on her bottom and abrasions on her lower back. The brother who went with Sergio to the hospital had burns on his body, scars all over, and both eyes blackened. In a press release, one detective said to the public that the injuries on their butt were like nothing we've ever seen. We cannot show you, it's so traumatizing. He said just dead skin cells from being hurt so badly, just horrible injuries on all the children. It was true that every single child of Larry and Bianca retained some level of injury, bruising, lacerations, abrasions, and swelling. Sheriff Marcus Lopez, he said, the father started repeatedly punching this little boy with closed fists. He punched him multiple times in the head and stomach area. This was a 6-year-old child. The sheriff claimed it was one of the worst abuse cases in the history of the county that anyone had ever seen. Bianca still swore she had no clue the children were being abused this bad. Doctors and detectives found this testimony doubtful, seeing as they had injuries to their face and arms. The sheriff said all the kids had bruises, cuts and marks on their bodies, and that these injuries and markings would have been obvious to anyone, especially the mother of the children. The parents continued to push the claim that the children fought and wrestled a lot, causing all these injuries, but doctors confirmed there was no way the young children could cause such heavy trauma by play fighting. But there's more. There's also reports from the Department of Children and Families. I actually have the report here. Let me go through it. They reported the mother advised that none of the children had any medical issues. They had not been sick in the days leading up to the incident, and that they were not on any medications. All 6 children were up to date on their shots. The mother explained she was typically gone all day. When she got home, the children were always bathed, fed, and had usually been put to bed by the father. The mother stated she did not go to tuck the children in, kiss them, or say anything to them before they slept. Now, the mother recalled that 2 weeks before the incident, the father whooped Sergio, but she did not remember exactly for what. At that time, she observed marks on his bottom as well as scarring. The mother said that she told herself she would leave the situation, but was waiting for the right time to leave and say something. Now, approximately 1 week prior, one of the children, the 9-month-old, crawled off the bed and fell, sustaining a bruise to his eye, but she could not recall any injuries. The mother stated approximately 1 week prior, she told the child that she would get him out of the situation and now feels guilty. So, on July the 6th, 2022, Sergio Rhodes was pronounced dead at 11 p.m. The Child Protective Investigator, the CPI, attempted to gather a 72-hour timeline from the father. However, the father claimed he could not recall anything except that he had been free, living with his children. The father stated he took his medication, which he takes every day. He could not remember what mental health diagnosis he takes the medication for, just that it was recommended to him by a psychiatrist when he was Baker acted in West Palm Beach. The father stated that when his child left him in the hotel room, he had a heartbeat and that he did everything the 911 dispatcher told him to do over the phone. The father recalled that after his children were taken to the hospital, an officer responded to the scene. This officer told him that he would let him know what's going on and that he was repeatedly told the child will be okay. He was confused as to why he was handcuffed and taken to jail, and mentioned that an officer informed him, "Your son died? You did it." The CPI continued to ask the father questions, but the father would not answer and would stare off and not respond. The father placed his head down on the table, refused to speak, stated he wanted an attorney, but he did not have one yet. The father was offered a drug screen and he agreed. He told the attending correctional officer he would take the drug screen, but then stated he wanted to be done with the interview. The CPI again attempted to gather information from the father, at which time he advised that he did not make him do anything in the toilet bowl, and told the correctional officer that the CPI was attempting to ask the same questions over and over again. Furthermore, the mother consented to a drug screen and tested positive for THC and buprenorphine. The father tested positive for THC. This is when the county sheriff arrested Larry and Bianca and charged them with 6 counts of child neglect with great bodily harm. On July 8, 2022, Larry Rhodes was charged with battery touch or strike. On July 11th, Larry was charged with aggravated child abuse. On August 9th, Larry was charged with murder while engaged in aggravated child abuse. Now, the autopsy report was received on September 19th. The autopsy found blunt force injuries on the head, contusions of the left face, deep soft tissue hemorrhage of the bilateral buttocks, a laceration of the common hepatic artery, healing scars and ulcerations of the bilateral buttocks, scars of the lower back and buttocks, contusions of both wrists with underlying deep soft tissue. Thankfully, Larry and Bianca were both found guilty of abuse. Larry was sentenced to life plus 35 years. Bianca took a plea deal with prosecutors in exchange for testifying against Larry. The other children unfortunately had to be put into the foster care system. Bianca denied ever causing harm to the children and was adamant for a long time she didn't see the abuse, only she knew Larry had issues. However, after some time and pressing from detectives, she admitted she had seen Larry beat the kids but did nothing to stop him. She claimed she never hit them, it was only Larry. She never took them to the doctor after he would beat them. She would just let them writhe in pain, not able or willing to put an end to the torture. Sheriff Lopez called the parents savages. The people of the county were emotionally shattered at the horrific news of the malnourished and beaten children and the deceased Sergio Rhodes. Maybe he was thirsty, the sheriff said. He went to the toilet, he was trying to survive. Mama caught him and the poor guy paid the price. Imagine that, paying the ultimate price simply for trying to survive. These children survived a war zone greater than any. The scars, emotionally and physically, are proof of that, as well as their lost older brother, viciously murdered for drinking water. So, if you made it through the end of the video, I'm now going to go through the crime scene photos from this case, just so you can get a real feel of the kind of environment these children were in. So this is outside of the house. Room 510 was where they lived. It's amazing to think they lived in a motel room. This is the underwear that Larry was wearing. I also have the same pair of underwear, just different color. I don't know why I just told you that. This is Sergio's car, Toyota Camry, I believe. So I mentioned Larry would beat the kids with a shoe. This is the bottom of the sole. Can you see the blood marks? He beat them so bad, the blood stained on the shoe and he just left it there. What a twat. This was a magazine clip found in the hotel. These were a bunch of bullets. This is outside the hotel door. As you can see, you have the police ribbon. So this is inside. And remember, there were 8 individuals that lived in here. So we have a PS3 over here. We have 2 TVs. But look at all the mess. So 8 people living across the 2 mattresses you see on the left. Look at all the clothes. Holy Moses, what kind of environment was this? This is the near side of the bed. You see all the kids' toys over here? All the clothes on the bed. And have a look at the bedside table. Pringles, Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. That stuff is good, but not in this picture. This is a closer look at the TV table, I guess. What on earth is this? Is that a ashtray maybe, or a pipe or something? I don't know. Look at all the dust. Although to be fair, on a PlayStation there's going to be a lot of dust. Nothing wrong with that. Again, ginger ale can over here. This must be an air humidifier, right? Am I correct? Wow, cereal boxes basically in the closet. Again, a PlayStation steering wheel here. Now, for a lot of crime scenes where child is the victim, a lot of the time it's either very poor people, disenfranchised, etc. But if you look at all the crap around this room, you had all those kids' toys, and now you got this Ferrari steering wheel. I think the money that Bianca was making wasn't so bad. They just spent it on crap. This is what I'm talking about. Look at all these toys. And good, obviously you want if the kids are living in this environment, let them get all the toys that they want. But again, this is the dining table, I guess. I've personally purchased these small taco wraps myself. They're pretty good. But there's trash everywhere. Closer look at the dinner table. You got kids' toys over here. What is this? Fresh. This is a baking box, maybe some cookies or something. That looks like a tin of tomatoes. Domino sugar, I use the same packet. Ketchup on a plastic plate, or like a cardboard plate, paper plate. Again, more toys and a whole bunch of Lego. These are the clothes Sergio was wearing. This was a gun found in the room. Is that an Uzi? I could be wrong. I'm not great with guns. So this was a chair found in the apartment. You see the blood right over there? But it gets worse. There's more blood over here. So we don't know whose blood that is, but maybe this was the shoe. When he was smacking the children, maybe this was the blood coming off, or it could have been numerous incidences where he's attacking the children. Here's further stains on the wall. Remember I mentioned that Larry would get multiple children to wear one of his big t-shirts and keep them stuck in there. That's so sick. I've never heard that before. Maybe this is blood stains, I'm not too sure. But as you can see, it could be ketchup, More blood stains on the chair. This seems like the wall where he would discipline the children. So this is the multiple clips and guns found in the apartment. A bunch of syringes, bullets, just a whole bunch of trash. Maybe that's his smoking kit. Or where he keeps his crap. That probably is a vape cartridge or something. That's a Samsung charger. I used to have one of those back in the day. More syringes over here. I guess he was just injecting dumb shit up his ass. Seems like that's possibly blood stains on the bed. So now we get into the bathroom where the main incident took place. So this is the bathroom as soon as the police came in. Now, as you can see, you see these plastic Tupperware boxes? They were using the bathroom sink as the actual sink. Sounds disgusting, but if you look at the environment, what other choice did they have? And somebody hasn't done the dishes because look at the stack. This is what it looked like when police removed everything, and then they used the infrared light to try and find bloodstains or something of that nature. So this is the bathroom floor. This is the bathroom floor from a further angle. So as you can see, different labels on where police have found small bloodstains. I mean, blood, blood, blood. This could be anything given the crap that was on it, but it still doesn't justify anything. Disgusting. This is the bathtub. See all the black marks around here? That tells me it has been used in a while. So this is the angle of the dining table looking from the bathroom. Maybe police moved stuff because it didn't look like this in the previous images. But my God, that is sickening. What is this on the whiteboard? Lives 2 times a day. What not? What not to do? Who knows? Maybe this was a form of discipline. So I mentioned in the story that there was a whole bunch of drinks in the apartment. As I said, money-wise, I mean, I know they're living in a hotel and maybe they couldn't afford a house, but they weren't completely broke. There's plenty of fluids and food for the kids. Here's a microwave on top of the fridge. More trash on the floor. Chocolate bars, cream pies, Fruit Loops. Holy Moses. Dirty towels. More dirty towels. This is a search warrant from the police. And finally, this is just a bag where they put Larry's clothes once they arrested him. What a sick individual. Those are the end of the crime scene photos.
Let's take you to Osceola County tonight, where a couple faces charges after their 6-year-old son was found unconscious with his head in a toilet. That child is now on life support. As West 2's Megan Mulatto tells us, the couple has 6 children and the entire family lived in a hotel room.
According to this 6-page arrest report, deputies were initially responding to a call of a drowning inside a hotel room on 192. When they arrived, they say they found a 6-year-old boy without a pulse. The report says the person who called 911 told deputies her 6-year-old son's head was in the toilet, like he was drinking water, and that he became unconscious. When deputies arrived, they say the 6-year-old wasn't breathing. They administered CPR until he was taken to the hospital with a life-threatening brain bleed and was put on life support. 8 people were found in the hotel room, 6 children and their parents, Larry Rhodes Jr. and Bianca Blaze. Both are facing several child neglect charges. Rhodes is also facing an aggravated child abuse charge. Deputies say they noticed visible injuries on the 6-year-old boy's face, including swollen eyes and blood in his mouth. A 4-year-old in the room also had bruises on his face and fresh cuts around his mouth, according to the arrest report. When the children's parents were asked about the injuries, the report says they claimed there was a fight between the siblings. But when the 4-year-old was asked, he said, quote, "Daddy hit me." Both parents were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning, where the report states Blaze mentioned Rhodes had whooped the kids in the past and that he has recently become more upset because he ran out of his medication for schizophrenia. In the interview, Blaze also denies having knowledge of her kids' injuries.